Trigger warning, mentions of abuse and trauma experiences will be talked about in this video. Hey everyone, today is going to be about trauma and abuse. Question, what is abuse/trauma? And how can we recognize it? Answer, abuse is defined as treating a person or animal with cruelty, violence, especially regularly or repeatedly. Trauma is essentially the emotional response to a horrible event or abuse. Generally, these two terms go hand in hand.
Question everything, question everything, question everything, question everything. Why?
Disclaimer, I am not an expert on these subjects I discuss in these videos. I only share information that I've personally done my research on, or relaying an expert's message. My goal or intention with these videos is to cultivate understanding, awareness, and acknowledge real-life issues that we as humans face. I do hold certain opinions about these subjects, and so bias can play a role in the way information is shared. I would also like to acknowledge that the way we perceive the world individually can be vastly different from one another, and that's good. However, it's also good to look at things from another perspective when learning about reality, otherwise our biased views can become harmful.
Now I feel like I shouldn't have to explain what specifically constitutes as cruelty or violence, but I'm going to so there's less room for confusion. Childhood traumatic stress occurs when violent or dangerous events overwhelm a child's or adolescent's ability to cope. Traumatic events may include neglect and psychological, physical, or sexual abuse, natural disasters, terrorism, and community and school violence, witnessing or experiencing intimate partner violence, commercial sexual exploitation, serious accidents, life-threatening illness, or sudden or violent loss of a loved one, refugee and war experiences, military family-related stressors such as parental deployment, loss, or injury, and that's just to name a few. Examples of abuse that have been normalized are physical, mental, emotional, or sexual abuse, humiliation, negating, criticizing, control, shame, accusing, blaming, denial, emotional neglect, and isolation. These are just the tip of the iceberg, and there are many different ways these are used depending on the relationship of the individuals. For example, emotional abuse is normalized by people talking about how they turned out fine even though they were left to fend for themselves, made fun of, had their social life restricted, constantly degraded, and never felt good enough no matter how hard they tried. If you experience something like that, that is indeed emotional abuse, and I'm sorry you went through that. I hear this argument a lot when talking about physical abuse to a child. Well, my parents hit me and I turned out fine. Let's take this apart to the basics. If you punch an adult in the face, what is that called? Assault. If you kick a dog, what is that called? Animal abuse. And if you smack a kid, what is that called? If you felt like answering that with discipline or teaching them respect, chances are you've probably normalized your own trauma. That is still child abuse. No matter how you choose to justify it, you're still an abuser if you've done any of that. Cue the cognitive dissonance. You know, those uncomfortable feelings that arise when our actions don't line up with our beliefs. So if these actions or behaviors are still being normalized, how are we able to recognize the abuse in the first place? Start with thinking about the way that someone makes you feel. Being mindful of your emotions when the individual does something to or around you. Like, are they warm and inviting, or do you try to withdraw and isolate yourself from them? Asking what keeps you in that relationship. Necessity, fear, love, enjoyment, etc. If it's healthy, you should feel stable and safe to express yourself freely. Codependency can be a major problem in an abusive relationship and can be a main factor in staying in that abusive cycle. For example, as a kid, I clearly couldn't look after myself like a working-class adult because I was a literal child. However, with my parents' dysfunctional and floundering marriage, it fell on me as the oldest child to fill the responsibility of my parents' emotional needs and adult responsibilities, or at least that's how it felt. And it resulted in listening to their very adult problems and trying to look for a job as soon as I could legally work to help with the bills. That simply stripped me of my childhood prematurely. Obviously, I couldn't leave my situation, I didn't have another place to go, but I could understand that it wasn't right shouldering all these responsibilities that weren't even supposed to be mine in the first place.
It's time for a mindful moment. We can take a moment to check in with ourselves.
I'm sorry, I won't do it again, I promise. Please, please don't take my favorite toy away. Nope, I've given you one too many chances, no more. You need to learn, this is your punishment. This is not fair. By imposing this punishment on me in hopes that I won't do it again, all I'm learning is to resent you because you are demanding my compliance and using fear and control rather than listening to me and presenting me with a choice. In the future, I'll learn to lie and hide what I've done for fear of your punishment. Instead of helping me learn from my mistakes, you are making me pay for them. My internal dialogue will be, what is wrong with me? My self-esteem will decrease, our relationship will be damaged, and I'll rely on external control to help me with my behaviour rather than learning to take responsibility for my own actions and behaviour.
When I say that my youngest had big feelings this weekend, epic feelings on a scale of Godzilla. There was a whole situation between him, my husband, and my older son about leaving, going out, staying. It imploded. So my husband and my older son went out. My younger son was very upset by this. And the way in which he expressed his sadness and pain was through anger. Because anger is the easiest emotion to express, especially when we do not have the words to express our sadness and pain. FYI, we do that too as adults. We use anger to cover up our pain, sadness, and stress. It's no different for children. So he was screaming, he was yelling, he was slamming doors. I could have responded in a couple of ways. I could have been like, oh, hell no, not up in my house, you be slamming doors. I could have ignored him. Or I could have swooped in right away and tried to fix it. The problem with those things is that we are neglecting what our child would actually need in that situation. See, part of our responsibility as conscious and gentle parents is to help our children regulate their emotion, recognize them, and regulate them. So if we respond in anger or ignore them or fix it, we are not helping them learn how to regulate all their feelings. So I gave him a few minutes to be upset. Knocked on the door, asked him if he needed me, if he wanted me to talk with him. He said no, he was still very angry. No problem. Left, waited a few more minutes, went back, same question. He still wasn't ready, but I could hear that the anger was coming down and the sadness was picking up. So I didn't go far. I stayed close. Again, knocked on the door and asked if he wanted mommy to come in, if he wanted to talk. And this time he said yes. I went in and I asked him if he wanted some cuddles. He said yes, he needs some cuddles. And I cuddled him and I asked, are you ready to tell mommy how you're feeling? And he said yes. He said, I'm very sad and my feelings are hurt. And I validated him and I explained to him that I understand that he is hurt and that sometimes hurt comes out in anger, and that's why he was slamming doors. And he's like, that's not what I was feeling. I was just really hurt. And I said, I understand. I said, how about me and you have some special time? Let's bake cupcakes. Loved it. He wanted to bake cupcakes. Got up, wiped his tears, gave me a big hug and kiss. He's like, I want to bake cupcakes for Dadu and my brother because I don't want them to think I'm still angry at them because I'm okay now. When we validate our children's feelings and we help regulate their emotions, we let them know that anger is okay, but anger is masking their pain and sadness. When we do that, we create adults who learn not to mask their pain and sadness with anger and can validate their own feelings and regulate themselves.
I left a comment on my friend's video there saying, if they're old enough to reason with, why are you hitting them? If they're not old enough to reason with, why are you hitting them? Seems like basic logic to me, right? That comment is blown up. And why? Because people are on there trying to justify child abuse. People are trying to say things like, hey, I got hit as a child and I turned out fine. Listen to me. You're on the internet trying to justify putting your hands on a child. You did not turn out fine. You need fucking therapy. Some of y'all have seemed to have forgotten that children are just small people trying to make sense of this crazy and fucked up world. They're allowed to not like things and they're allowed to have a hard time. Stop expecting your kids to handle their emotions when you clearly can't even do it yourself.
And both my parents frequently blamed their kids about their financial issues amongst other problems. And that was uncalled for. I know parents have kids for many reasons, but if you do have them, I need you to understand that looking after them and their needs isn't an attack on your freedom as an adult. Instead, the bare minimum as a caregiver. Also, I was never allowed to freely express myself without the fear of punishment or some form of ridicule or invalidation. Now, my parents physically, mentally, and emotionally abused me, and focusing on the physical, since that's easier to visualize, and conceptualize, it did not teach me to respect my parents, but to fear them. I feared being honest or having simple open conversations with them, and it gave me bad anxiety when doing so with others as an adult. So growing up, I was forced to become fiercely independent and didn't have the emotional support I needed. Again, neglecting or invalidating your child's needs teaches them that either their needs don't matter, or they are a burden. A child can't choose who they are, but you can choose to at least show the bare minimum as a parent and be there for them. Listen to their needs and ask what they expect rather than immediately tearing them down for being open. If they're expressing a need, it is literally your duty as a parent to listen. Managing my life and my parents' burdens and looking after my siblings taught me to put myself and my needs last. This is known as people-pleasing, and it's a toxic coping mechanism. I only felt good about what I could provide rather than simply being content with existing, a transactional relationship amongst others, if you will. And a common phrase that people like me have heard frequently before goes, "Wait until you grow up, then you'll have real problems." Or, "Quit your crying or I'll give you something to cry about." In other words, you're just a kid and you can't possibly have any real problems like adults do. Phrases like this minimize and invalidate a child's feelings and experiences, teaching the child that their perception can't be trusted and to seek validation from outside sources. Symptoms in adult kids can be seen as lack of confidence, problems with emotional regulation, difficulty making or maintaining relationships, and not acting appropriately for their age. Side note, people with a neurodivergent brain like myself may struggle with these exact things, and abuse only exacerbates the issue, especially when narcissistic abusers tend to exploit their higher levels of empathy. This can cause major mental health issues when left undiagnosed and untreated, like anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and substance abuse. Overall, being a parent who practices respect, listening without judgment, and making and honoring boundaries is essential for good, healthy child-parent relationships. Plus, now you know more about abuse and trauma. So if you ever get told by a child that they are being abused, you can read the article link down below and help them out properly. I know that would have helped me growing up. I feel like this was a much shorter video than I'm used to, but I did kind of like take forever with the script and I was like struggling to finish it, so I don't think I added as much as I normally would. But that's fine. And I could go on forever, practically, about all of the abuse and trauma that I suffered through in my childhood, but that'd be a whole separate video. That again would probably go on forever because there's so many stories I could tell, but also some of them might even be repressed, so we love that. No, we don't. Hitting our kids is not okay on any accord. It's child abuse, thank you very much. Same with emotional and other types of abuse. Like, there's so many, like, I could bring up so many examples. Maybe I should do that as like a sub video. Like, I should do like a list of just all the ways that can be abuse and like examples of abuse, or maybe just like a TikTok series and I could link that. I don't know. But if you do want to follow me on TikTok, the link is also down below along with all of my socials and all the links to the resources I used for this video. But that is all. I hope you guys learned a little bit and continue to do research about this because it is really important that we stop the cycle of generational trauma and abuse, so we can like have more empathy and understanding amongst people, and not be as prejudgmental, prejudiced. And if you've been following along with this series, I really appreciate it. I hope you've been enjoying it so far. I don't remember what the next topic is going to be, but stay tuned for next month's video, whatever that topic is going to be about. I don't even have the next script. I need to work on that right now. But anyway, if you're new to the channel, you can click subscribe down below, and you can also click another video of mine or playlist, perhaps. But that is all, so have a fan-freaking-tastic day, and don't forget to question everything.